This tutorial will explain the usage of main and subtracks in detail. So-called main tracks are the tracks 1 to 4 in system digital 132, 124 and evolution. Respectively, the tracks 1 to 3 in system digital 143 and go. The number of parallel main tracks is related to the available curve ratings in the respective track system. In an analogical system, this number of parallel tracks limits also the number of cars which can take part in a race. With the introduction of digital systems, multi-track layouts lost a bit of their relevance, as the number of cars is no longer limited by the number of lanes. With the digital systems, also new item parts came up, like the digital switches, by which you now can extend, for example, from a 2 to a 4-lane layout. In order to copy this option in the software, the aid of subtracks has been implemented into the software. As there is a separate tutorial for the multi-track layouts, I would like to focus here on the question how to use subtracks, when to use subtracks, and in which cases subtracks should not be used. I would like to start with the last question. No subtrack is required if you just want to build a single lane pit stop. When using the default settings from the options, I just have to add the entry switch to the pit stop lane. The software will already apply the required offset and add a single lane straight to the left. Also for the following straights, the required offset will automatically be applied and the single lane straights will be added to the right. If you want to replace one of the single lane straights with a so-called pit stop adapter unit, which is a special item for the pit stop, you only have to delete the single lane straight and insert a pit stop adapter unit out of the shoulder menu instead. This principle applies for all 3-lane sections in your track layout. Therefore, I would like to give you another example by using a digital narrow section in the opposite sequence than it normally is supposed to. Continue by adding further items with or without offset and use the actual starting part of the narrow section to go back to 2 lanes. Once again, I will use the single lane straights from the shoulders menu in order to add the 3rd lane. When building a pit stop lane like shown in the example, the software will automatically do a proper assignment of the lanes. For the second example of a 3-lane layout, we will have to do a manual assignment of the lanes. You will find more details in the tutorial line assignment. So please keep in mind that for a 3-lane layout, and especially for a standard pit stop lane, no subtrack is required, but can be implemented by just adding some single lane straights from the shoulders menu. Which means that a subtrack only becomes necessary if you want to extend your 2-lane track to more than 3 lanes, or if the lane should go into different directions. This should be explained now by respectively 2 examples, in the system of digital 124 and 132, as well as digital 143 and go. Within the first example, I will expand a 2-lane layout to 8 lanes and afterwards narrow down again to the initial 2 lanes. And therefore, I start with a straight and add 3 times the end piece of a right digital narrow section. To get back to 2 lanes, I add the start piece of the right narrow section, also by 3 times. All of these pieces are still part of the first main track. Of course, it also would have been possible to use the items from a left narrow section in order to continue the main track left-hand side instead of right-hand side as shown in this example. Now I select the so-called anchor point of the selected straight in order to start a left subtrack at this particular position. The first item of each subtrack will always be added with a 1-lane offset. As for the end piece of a narrow section, this offset is not required. I have to use the arrow buttons to bring the switch into the intended position. All of the red highlighted items are now part of the first subtrack. The gaps in the middle will now be filled by straights, and therefore 2 more subtracks are required. In order to add these subtracks, I once again have to define the starting position by selecting the anchor point. Afterwards, I just add the intended number and type of items. In order to keep a clear view of your track layout, you should always try to use as less subtracks as possible. The empirical formula for the number of required subtracks is maximum number of lanes, in our example 8, minus the 2 lanes from the main track, which leads us to 6. This value we have to divide by 2, as each track has 2 lanes. What brings us finally to a required number of 3 subtracks. Within the second example, I would like to set up a 2-lane pit stop lane. And therefore I will place the entry switch of the pit lane as part of my main track. Now, just by clicking the right anchor point, I will add the end piece of a right narrow section as the first piece of my subtrack. With this example, I would like to show you a pit stop lane with 2 refueling positions. As soon as the pit stop lane is completed, I can continue with the main track. As you can see in this example, it is also possible to give the subtrack a different direction than the main track has, just to merge them again further down the road. For scale 1 to 43, there are the special items of the mechanical switches. As these switches are explicitly designed to split the track into different directions. The software interprets the direction which goes straight ahead as the continuation of the main track, while the turnoff is defined as a starting point of a subtrack, which means that in this case there is no anchor point as known from the previous example, but the turnoff itself is the anchor for the subtrack. All other items in System Digital 143 and Go again have these 2 anchor points at their ends, which now should be shown in our final example by inserting some single lane curves. Once again, I will continue the main track with its right lane. To continue the left lane, I have to click the anchor point where the subtrack should start. The subtrack ends as soon as it is merged with the main track again. Finally, I have to assign the lanes from the subtrack items to the respective lanes of the main track which they are connected to. All details about the lane assignment can be found in the following tutorial called Lane Assignment.